When We Disagree is a show about arguments, how we have them, why we have them, and their impact on our relationships and ourselves. Why is a red herring, which means distraction or diversion from the real issue, called a red herring? There's quite the dispute over this, and the evidence all dates back centuries. Some claim that the smelly fish was used to train hunting dogs, or maybe to train horses. Others say the powerful scent from red herring was used by fugitives to mislead dogs. Regardless, all agree that red herring don't really even exist anyway, at least not in live form. Herring are silver. They only turn reddish when rotten, or smoked. But if they're smoked, confusingly, they become a kipper. It's all terribly weird and confusing, which, strangely enough, is exactly the point of the red herring argument fallacy. In simple terms, a red herring is when someone introduces a point that distracts from the actual issue at hand, essentially a way of refocusing the conversation. Imagine you're upset that your significant other forgot to pick up the groceries you ordered. Again. You bring this to their attention. Instead of discussing their forgetfulness around the groceries you keep ordering, they bring up how they took out the trash last week, or straightened up the living room. Now technically, the trash or the tidiness of a shared living space is an issue that should be discussed, but it's completely irrelevant to the problem of groceries that you brought up. By focusing on this unrelated issue, they've thrown in a red herring. This creates confusion and sometimes even allows the person who's using the fallacy to avoid responsibility for their own actions or mistakes. In our grocery example, it shifts the focus from the task they neglected to your supposed fault in not taking out the trash or helping tidy up the shared living space. The same pattern occurs in this example. You're trying to have a difficult conversation with a friend about how they keep flaking on plans you've made. You might bring this up, and when you do, instead of addressing your concerns, the friend responds by saying, "Well, you didn't respond to the meme I texted you last week." Once again, this shifts the attention off their behavior and your shared plans and onto yours on a separate issue, avoiding the original issue. It might even make you question your own actions, even if you're not the one at fault. Recognizing red herrings can allow us to bring conversations back on track. It doesn't mean that the other person's responses are irrelevant. It doesn't even mean they're deliberate and that this is a strategic tactic. It could be compulsive or reflexive. Let's just handle these issues one at a time. First, we can talk about groceries, then we can also talk about trash, and we can also talk about who's cleaning up the living room more often. Recognition of these tactics also helps prevent manipulation. If you're in a conversation with someone who's using this fallacy to avoid accountability, recognizing it means you don't get caught in a web of distractions that ultimately leaves nothing resolved. I'm Michael Lee, Professor of Communication and Director of the Civility Initiative at the College of Charleston. Our guest today on When We Disagree is Clint Eisenhower. Clint is the South Carolina State Chair for the Forward Party, a third party dedicated to finding better political candidates who are, quote, raging centrists and avoid polarized extremes. Clint, tell us an argument story.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. I've listened to some of your episodes, and I really appreciate what you're doing. My story starts with a confrontation and then leads to an argument. And then I've been thinking about this. This happened 20 years ago, and I still wish that it had come out to a better end. At any rate, I was recruited by a former CEO to come to a really wonderful job several states away and take over for a guy who was retiring. The guy who had been in that job for 10 years or so was highly respected in the industry, knew a lot of people, and so I was looking forward to meeting him, getting to know him, and it worked out exactly as I predicted up to that point. He told me in our first meeting that he was looking for retirement, and as soon as I got my feet under me, he would be happy to go off into the sunset, and we'd go that direction.
Gotcha.
So, that's the way things worked out. After the first week or so, I was acclimated. I went to him and said, I'd like to move on with some meetings where you can introduce me to the people that I need to know and so forth. And he said, well, I'm involved in a project right now, but we'll get to that. Well, after a week or so, nothing had happened, so I pressed him again. He set up a meeting, and set up a couple of meetings. And the first one, I thought it was kind of strange, but he introduced me, but he said nothing about his retirement and nothing about why I was there, which was a little awkward.
Yeah.
And then when that happened in the second meeting, I sort of knew something was up, something was afoot. So I went to him that afternoon and I said, you know, we apparently are not on the same page here. Something is blocking our transition path. And it may be because you think I'm not the right guy or whatever it is. I want to talk about it. Well, he immediately got defensive and very angry and said, well, you're just coming after me, aren't you? And it was a reaction that I thought was completely inappropriate. And so then I got a little torqued up about it, quite frankly, and we had somewhat of an uncomfortable conversation that led really to an argument after that. But toward the end of it, he more or less sort of admitted that he just wasn't ready to retire. And so we sort of left it at that, and we both realized that we had probably said more things than we needed to. And so I went back to my office, called the CEO who had recruited me, told him about the conversation. And by this time, of course, I had bought a new house, moved my family.
Right.
And so I said, look, this is not what I signed up for, and it's a sort of a needless overlap here. And so something needs to happen. Well, it did. He took care of it. And the next day, this guy announced his retirement in another week, and that's what happened. But then he had been the representative of the company in several industry and civic organizations.
Okay.
He continued that and went on to represent some issues that, with the authority of the company,
right,
that was inappropriate. And so I had to call him and tell him to stand down.
It was sort of sabotaging your ability to do that role as well.
Right. And so, as you can imagine, we did not end on our relationship on a good note. And I really regret that because I did admire the guy. But what I realized afterwards were two things. First of all, retirement is very traumatic for a lot of people if they don't plan correctly. And he just didn't want to give up the relevancy and all the things that went with that position. We see that happening now in our politics and in government and a lot of different directions. And so, that really had an impact on me, and it changed the way I retired ultimately.
Yeah.
The second thing, though, is that, it was hurtful to both of us, and perhaps I didn't handle it correctly. I didn't handle it a way that could have been more productive for everyone. And maybe I was a little too naive. Maybe I should have had more details around the transition process and so forth. But at any rate, that was my confrontation, my argument, and my story.
Thanks for that. I have two lines of questioning. Your phrase retirement as traumatic, you give up your relevancy. I want to come back to that. So let's put a pin in that for a moment. The second thing you said that really struck me was about where you look not just to this person, because I think it's easy from the outside looking in, at least as I hear the story, I think you were kind of hoodwinked by somebody who hadn't done enough self-reflection to realize that they were ready to move on. And so you're this fake successor, and you move your family and yourself states and states away and upend your life for a false promise, like a mirage in the desert. And so it's hard for me to hear that story and not kind of be mad for you. I mean, putting myself in that position, I would be, apoplectic, right, to say the least. And then I also hear you have some sympathy for this guy, and then you take some of this on yourself as well when you say maybe I didn't handle it correctly. So say more about the I didn't handle it correctly, your own self-reflection about your role in this dynamic. Because on the outside looking in, it seems a little bit like you were duped, and then now you, as the person who was duped, is saying, well, it was kind of my fault too for being duped.
Well, I just always wonder, when you have a confrontation or argument with someone, it's very likely that, we never know what that person has gone through or is going through. We never know, what kind of baggage they're bringing to the table. I was very excited about this opportunity, very much looking forward to it, and I sort of got, I imagine, a little over anxious, and perhaps I could have done it a little better. Perhaps the three of us that were involved in this thing, perhaps we all could have done it a little better. But I regret not having a relationship with this guy anymore. I continue to think that he was that what really drove the blockage was his inability to really, or his lack of readiness in terms of this really life change that he was going to experience, and and I get that now, having gone through retirement myself. I get that, but I think that's something that we all need to wrestle with as we go through all the changes that we go through in life. And it's not always fun to, as we can see in a lot of our political leaders now, because they're certainly in the public, right? And they don't want to give up the reins. They think they've got gas in the tank left, and they want to push forward, and it's difficult. But it's none of us are the world can't do without us, right? We're all can be replaced. So that was sort of my takeaway.
And that's a great transition to the second thing I wanted to talk about, which is the sympathy you feel for this guy, even despite being kind of hoodwinked in terms of facing the irrelevancy or risked irrelevancy of retirement, the kind of trauma of retreating from the public stage. And then hearing you talk about this, I introduced you as the South Carolina State Chair of the Forward Party, pushing for, it's a centrist movement that you're trying to lead, but that is also fairly revolutionary in terms of upending the two-party structure in American politics. If you were wildly successful, the result would be maybe centrism, but also it would be fairly revolutionary in terms of the way that our politics are organized. And you're doing that all in retirement.
That's right. So, and I think that does have some relevancy to it because, I don't want to be irrelevant in retirement either. I don't think anyone does. And I think one of the things that if we're sort of the kind of people who want to make a difference, want to change, we look for ways to stay relevant. And so I've been doing this work now for, we stood the party up 3 years ago. And already I'm looking for my replacement because the world moves on, the world changes. And, I think as a leader, we need to be, recognize the fact that, as things change, we're not always relevant and always the person to meet the challenge of today. Now we might be able to offer advice and counsel and wisdom and those sorts of things, and those are all good and very valuable. Yeah. But that doesn't mean we have to be the guy in the chair.
How hard will it be for you to accept that your replacement is ready to do your job and then really truly fade into the sunset?
Well, I recognize that there will be that I will have some heartburn about it, I'm sure, but I also can't wait to fulfill other roles in the same under the same umbrella.
Yeah, and
there are many other things that I can do that I look forward to doing.
Yeah,
that will keep me involved, but it's. That's just part of life. It's something that we all got to continue to do to strive forward and to not be complacent, but to be involved at the level where we can reach our best potential for everyone concerned.
And to use your metaphor of gas in the tank, and some of the resistance of fading into, quote, irrelevancy in retirement is a kind of continued belief in self-efficacy. It's not just a fear there. It's also a self-belief that you've still got a lot to contribute and to say. And so from your activities and from your statements here, it strikes me that you believe that you still have a lot of gas in the tank.
Well, I certainly hope so, but I also am in a better position now that I'm a little older and that I have this perspective
Uh,
to recognize what my shortcomings are. And so, for instance, in this political party that we're trying to build, we need young people. We
mhm.
need people who are going to have the energy and have very different perspectives than we do. And sometimes I don't know exactly the right way to communicate that. I'm not sure that I have that that I'm facile in the tools of social media and all those the new ways of communication. And communication used to be my business,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure that I'm as good as I need to be now to meet the challenges that we have. So um, I still have some things to offer, but I also recognize that we need a broad. This is a broad tent effort, and we need other voices, other people stepping up and taking the leadership roles.
One of the things I'm hearing from you is kind of a consistent faith in the power of work and effort and movement. And so you said we can't be complacent. We have to be involved. We have to reach our full potential. Why not just spend some time in retirement on a fishing dock?
So I did that.
Okay.
I did that for about 3 years, and it was I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I enjoy every fish that I caught. I enjoyed every round of golf that I played. But I also am so thankful that even though it was a very difficult uh, thing that drove me to this challenge, uh, I'm appreciative of that because it sort of I needed to answer that call, and I continue to do that, and I'm convinced that there is a lane for our success as a third party in American politics today. Um, I think we're screaming for it. We know that 70% of the people in this country are dissatisfied. They're disaffected voters, and they want something different. Uh, I think that is what we're building, and we're building it from the ground up, not the top down.
Yeah, and just in terms of your own involvement in this, you you started this with a story about a personal conflict, but now you've picked an even bigger institutional challenge, to put it mildly, the kind of like twin Death Stars of American politics, which is the two-party system, which rules the roost. And so that's got to feel both exciting and perhaps pretty daunting. And then, your chances of success are probably, I'm guessing, fairly long term.
It's a generational strategy. Uh, I wake up every morning and, I have a few moments of wondering whether or not I want to tilt at windmills today. But I go out and I do it because all I have to do is turn on the news, and I immediately am reminded of exactly why I'm doing it, exactly what is fueling
Right.
this effort. And I'll tell you the other thing that has been an unforeseen benefit in this to
Uh-huh.
me, and that is that as we have broadened our community across the state, and now we have almost 4,000 folks, but we have an inner circle of about 25 people, and now what started out as a movement still is a movement, but now it's about the people. It's about,
Mm.
I have made friends that I would never have made. I have a circle of relationships that are incredibly important to me. And that's what begins to take over, from just the cause, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Let's tie this together, the relationship between your current revolutionary centrism, your raging centrism, and your organizational efforts on behalf of that, and this really important conflict in your professional life quite some time ago. What have you learned about successful conflict now that you're very much in the political conflict business? What have you learned about successful conflict over a lifetime, including the story you told at the top of this episode, that informs the work that you're doing now on behalf of the Forward Party?
Well, that's I keep trying to draw lessons from everything that I've learned and try to be a better communicator because of that. One of the things that I think is very important that I've learned is that when we see blockages in what we're trying to make happen, it's important to be direct about that and to call them out for what they are, but to also call them out with compassion and with a sense of humility, understanding that, as I said earlier, we all bring different circumstances and baggages to every experience, and we need to understand that the people we might have disagreements with that seem to be blocking us, maybe there are reasons that we don't understand, and that conversation, and a civility about the way we conduct ourselves can bring that out. And I usually find that they're very easily explained circumstances when I'm frustrated about something, and when I actually call the person or go see the person or have lunch with the person and we talk about it, I find that it's not the blockage that I thought it was. This example that I used from 20 years ago seems to be now sort of an extreme, but at the same time, there's not a more extreme times in my lifetime that I can remember that as far as politics in our country go. But you have to learn how to talk to people and how to engage with people in a way that allows them to be who they are as well. That sounds kind of new agey. I'm not sure, but you get what I mean.
I do, and it's a wonderful new age close, Clint. Clint Eisenhower, thank you so much for being on When We Disagree.
Thank you, Michael.
When We Disagree is recorded at the College of Charleston with creator and host Michael Lee. Recording and sound engineering by Jesse Kunz and Lance Laidlaw. Reach out to us at whenwedisagree@gmail.com.